I'm Dr. Selena Fisk, and welcome to this episode of Make Data Talk. In this podcast, I help you turn your spreadsheets into stories in a way that is practical, accessible, and hopefully much more useful than your grade 9 maths textbook. Today, I'm going to be riffing about the three things that are foundational to my work, and I use them every day: data literacy, data visualization, and data storytelling. So in my work with different organizations, I have a visualization, and you might have seen it on social. So it's three kind of circles, and they're all the same size and they're side by side. And the first one is data literacy, the middle one is data visualization, and the end one is data storytelling. While it might look and sound like it's a linear journey, that we start off building our data literacy, we then move on to data visualizations, and once we've done that, we can move on to data storytelling. That's not the case. We do actually need to kind of jump back and forward around when we get new and different data sets and types, or if we change roles, or we move organizations, or we're promoted, because the data will change, the visualizations will change, the tech will change. But it is true that the end goal ultimately is to get to the point of data storytelling, because it's not until we get to data storytelling that we can actually lead change and we can actually do something with the information that we've got. So our foundational skills, if you like, are sitting in that data literacy piece and the data visualization. And then we need skills to be able to data storytell, but we can't do that without those first two. So I'm just going to talk about those ones first of all. So data literacy is an understanding of the different data types that you've got, what's available, and what those different metrics mean. There was a 2018 Gartner survey of chief data officers' views, and they were asked what they felt that the biggest roadblocks to success were. And poor data literacy was the second highest ranked roadblock that they could see. Interestingly, the number one roadblock was culture challenges to accept change, so fear of change. Probably unsurprising. But poor data literacy being second highest in, I guess, that list really reaffirms findings that I see and the things that I learn every day when people say to me that their bosses and that their leaders assume that they know what the data means and they actually don't. So in every role that we go into, we have different data sets, we have different metrics, different visualization tools will pull out different pieces of information at different times. And while there might be consistencies across roles or across organizations, we actually need to be across all of those really key data sets and make sure that we and our people actually understand what they mean. I often work with rooms of executives and I talk through a couple of data literacy principles, like differences around profit margin and percentages and how some of those things are calculated. Not particularly high level. I mean, they are taught in year 8 and 9 maths, but we have many people getting into those roles and they haven't necessarily thought about those types of metrics or the maths maybe since high school. What I find when I share those data literacy pieces with executives is that I often get people actually thanking me for doing it. And I share that because the reason that they thank me is that they say that they've always wanted to know more and that they've got questions, but they're either worried about asking them because they're worried about looking silly. They don't know who to ask or who to go to, I guess, who's a safe person to find out some of these things from. So it is really important that we build our skill regardless of the role that we're in our organization. It's important that we don't make assumptions about people's data literacy, and it's important that we support others to really build their understanding as well, because ultimately if they don't understand the numbers to begin with, they're absolutely not going to be able to engage in data storytelling. They're not going to be able to use it in their work if they don't actually understand it in the first place. Charles Seif wrote a book called Proofiness, How You're Being Fooled by the Numbers. And one of my favorite things that he talks about in that book is the idea that essentially nobody cares about the number 5. And for me, this is a really great example of why data literacy is important. Data literacy, when we teach people what the numbers mean, it actually gives them a context and a meaning that sits around the number. So that number 5 that nobody cares about actually does mean something, and people do start to care about it because they understand the significance of that value and actually what it means for them or their team or for their clients. He uses a similar example to this in his book. But for example, if I said to you, I have 5 dogs, I drank 5 glasses of wine, or I won $5 million. All of those things mean something completely different, but it's still the same number 5. But you know the significance of each of those things, and some of them you would want more than others, because you actually understand the context. And that's what we need to be doing for our people and for ourselves, is building that understanding of the context that sits around it. The second piece then, so data literacy and understanding the numbers is really important, but the second piece then is where those numbers are visualized and we start to get graphs and images that represent the information. And it's that old adage, picture's worth 1,000 words. In the data world, it might be that one graph is worth 1 million data points, for example, because we know that we can get, and crypto is a really good example of that, millions and millions of data points into one really good visualization. So we can see the value of crypto over, say, a 12-month period, and we know how frequently that changes. So there are millions of data points in there. Again, tech will change, the visualizations will change, and what you see in one role or in one particular year won't necessarily be the same visualizations that you'll be presented with indefinitely. So it's really important that we're able to read and interpret and understand what we're being given, but also have the confidence, if we're given something that doesn't actually serve us, have the confidence to be able to know what to ask for and be able to go to a person who could help us, or even create it ourselves, to create a visualization to convey or to represent the information that we really care about or the trends that we're really interested in. When it comes to visualizations, some of them come more easily than others. So visualizations like bar graphs and line graphs we see quite often in social media. We saw, for example, the COVID graph. We know what an exponential function is because that's what COVID was. It was an exponential growth of the virus. We see graphs like that in the media all the time. So people generally are pretty good at reading and interpreting and understanding those visualizations. The problem is we've got other visualizations that are hard to read because we don't see them very often. And again, they might not have been shown to you since middle school maths, for example. So things like a scatter plot or a box and whisker plot show really different visualizations of the data, and actually are sometimes a better option for visualizing the data in a way that's actually going to tell us something that's really meaningful. So we need the skills, as I said, to read those visualizations that we're given, but also the confidence and the courage to say, well, this visualization really doesn't serve me. It doesn't answer the questions that I'm trying to answer. Maybe it's too noisy. It's got too much information in it. It's not clear. At the end of the day, we actually want really tidy visualizations that show us the trends and the insights that we're looking for in the best way possible. So it's definitely quality over quantity. If we can get the data and the story and the trends and the insights represented in one visualization, that's actually the ultimate goal. It often takes more than that. It often takes a couple because we want to see a couple of different perspectives, but that's the goal of every single visualization. How can we represent this information in the best way possible to convey meaning? So we can have a really good data literacy, we can have amazing visualizations, and we might even be super savvy at developing our own in, say, spreadsheets, or in, say, a Tableau or a Power BI or Google Looker, which are all visualization dashboards. At the end of the day, neither of those two things actually impact practice. They don't impact people. They don't impact, say, our clients and our teams. They're important foundations, but the goal is absolutely to get to the point of data storytelling. Now, Brent Dykes has done a lot of work in data storytelling. He wrote a great book called Effective Data Storytelling, and he's worked with companies in the US around their skills and how to tell a data story. There's, I guess, two parts to data storytelling for me. He very much talks about data stories as, when we get up and actually present a data story to other people. So whether that's a board, whether it's a client or a customer or to people that we work with. That's true, and it's really important that we have that skill and can do that really effectively, particularly obviously when we're trying to lead change and motivate people to understand what's going on. And we engage in data storytelling in our work every day that we're engaging with data, because what we want to be doing is thinking about what's that data actually telling me, what are the trends and the insights that I'm seeing, and then what can I do about it. And so for me, data storytelling, when we think about it in our own work, in our day-to-day, or sitting with a colleague or sitting with other members of our team, data storytelling for me takes the form of those two questions I just used in that last description. So the first question is what are the trends and the insights in the data? So we want to do an investigation into the data and we want to pick out those trends and those insights. And the second question, once we've got those trends and insights and once we've worked out what's more of a priority than other things, is what do we actually do about it now that we know? So as I say, there are absolutely times where you might need to get up and present data to other people, and Brent Dykes has got some great resources and support for doing that. But day to day, with our colleagues, with our team, with other people that we work with, we are looking at our own data, we're reflecting on what's happening, and we're thinking about what's it telling me, what trends are coming up, what are those insights that are coming out. And then we're thinking, so what? What do I do about that now? So that's a really kind of quick introduction to data storytelling, and I will certainly spend more time in later episodes unpacking that a little bit more. But as I mentioned, being able to identify the trends and the insights and look at the data and the visualizations that we're given and then think about actions really relies on having that good data literacy to begin with, because we can't expect people to engage with the numbers and the data at the other end if they don't actually understand it to begin with. And it relies on having good visualizations that actually do what we need them to do and represent the data in a way that's useful and helpful, and doesn't rely on us having to go back and dig further and further. Just going to leave you with one last little bit of information. It came out of a Click publication about 4 years ago, and they said that from the time data is collected through to the time that it is acted upon, about 80% of the time is spent collecting and organizing the data and just getting it to a point where we can think about actions. And so for me, that 80% sits in that data literacy and the visualization space, and the 20% sits in the data storytelling. So in our own work, day to day, working with our colleagues and our teams, but also when we're leading other people, your challenge from this episode is really to think about, how can you shrink that 80%? How can you upskill people in their data literacy and get really good data visualizations to shrink down that time so that we're maximizing the time at the other end, which is spent actually acting on the data, and which is the fun stuff, let's be honest. It's actually why we're doing this and why I love doing what I do. So we want to shrink that 80%. And we want to reduce the 80%, and we want to maximize and expand that 20%, and really kind of want to get into the actions and doing fun things with it. So thanks again for joining me for this episode of Make Data Talk. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm at Dr. Selena Fisk. I have another podcast as well. It's called A Beautiful Mind, and it's where I get to interview really awesome people who are neurodistinct. And/or I'd really appreciate a review and a subscribe on this podcast. It obviously just helps with rankings. We love data, obviously. It just means that more people are hopefully able to see and access this podcast. So thanks again for joining us. Talk to you next time.